in our cities. Iraq bombarded them and shelled those areas, residential areas, and also launched missile attacks on our cities. A clear example of that was the city of Dezful, which came under attack by Iraqi soldiers. And Iraqi soldiers were very angry at the people of Dezful because the fall of this fool to the enemy meant the fall of the Khuzestan province. The resistance of the people and the sacrifices made by our people, it was the greatest defeat that the Iranian people imposed on Iraqi troops. So, because of the same reason, for several months, their houses came under intense missile attacks by the Iraqi army. During the war, Iraq acted against all international regulations and used chemical weapons against us. Iraq acted against the innocent people of Sardasht and even the innocent people of Halabja, which is an Iraqi city, actually launched gas attacks against them and killed them. It was not only these three instances of war crimes. Iraq attacked our cities, launched chemical attacks in the battlefront, launched chemical attacks on other cities. Even those who were our captives, and tortured the Iranian soldiers who had been captured by them, who had been held captive. And some of our people who had been held captive, they were killed and martyred, including our oil minister, martyr Tond Guyan. Despite all the war crimes committed by Iraq and the aggression launched by the former Iraqi regime on us, no one in the world, no power in the world, and no organization, no international organization actually stood up to this aggression. And it is an important lesson to us. The history of the 8 years of the Holy Defense is not a history of the past. It is a lesson to us in the future. The history of the 8 years of Holy Defense is alive and will remain alive forever. It is a beacon of light for us to guide us in the future. The 8-year imposed war, taught us how to stand on our own feet during days and time of hardship and act under the leadership, under the command of the leader, remain united and be ready to make sacrifices and be hopeful of final victory. It taught us to trust each other and the officials. And it taught us that we should know that through taking initiatives and making sacrifices and having faith, final victory is ours. The beginning of this war was actually, the war started with just one excuse, and that was violating a bilateral agreement between Iran and Iraq. The aggression launched against Iran by Saddam Hussein, it started with this pretext that the 1975 agreement, they said that agreement, it was not a good treaty for himself and Iraq. Although that agreement, many discussions and many talks had been held to conclude that agreement, and Saddam Hussein himself had signed that agreement. In fact, that was the reason why the war began, and Saddam Hussein tore up that agreement to pieces in front of cameras, and that was the point when war began. And after that, the Iraq began to launch attacks on us. Now, 38 years on, the Saddam event and Saddam Hussein's aggression and his violation of that agreement once again has been repeated. The same government that encouraged other governments in order to sit at the negotiating table, and the same government that even for the sake of one sentence actually took the time of our negotiators for 17 days, and the same government that after 12 years of putting pressure on the Iranian nation failed and submitted to the logic of our diplomats and signed an agreement which was in the interest of all parties and all regional countries and the whole world. It was similar to the story of Saddam Hussein, and the same story was repeated once again. An aggressor, again, an individual who does not abide by any international regulations. This individual broke his commitments It was a multilateral agreement, and it was approved by international institutions and by the UN and by the Security Council, by the UN Security Council. This agreement, that person has violated this agreement and has breached this agreement. The same war has repeated what happened during those years. On that day, Iraq was one of the cronies of the United States that was standing up to the Iranian nation, and Iraq had been supported by different countries from the East and the West. But today, we are not facing a proxy war. The United States is directly standing up to the Iranian nation and is confronting the Iranian nation. It is the United States that has breached its commitments. The United States is the one that has initiated the move and has broken its promises and has breached its promises. In the first phase, the Iranian nation disheartened and disappointed the United States the same way that the Iranian nation stood up to Iraq during those years, and along with all our armed forces, the same way that the nation stood up to Saddam Hussein's forces, and the same way that the Iranian nation disheartened and disappointed Saddam Hussein's forces. Saddam Hussein said that it was because of the 1975 agreement was his pretext, but in fact Saddam Hussein wanted to destroy the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Trump, in appearance, it looks like he has just broken and breached the JCPOA, but inside him, Trump's main objective is to deal a blow to the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Islamic Revolution. Saddam Hussein, despite making efforts for 8 years, supported by all major powers and regional powers, Saddam Hussein failed to achieve his objectives. He couldn't change the Talvik line. He failed to change the 1975 regulations. He failed to deal a blow to the robust Islamic Republic of Iran. The more time passed, the stronger the Iranian nation became, the more determined the Iranian armed forces became. And finally, after 8 years, we achieved victory on the military front, on the political front, on the ethical front. Our nation emerged victorious. We recaptured our territory from the aggressor. The United Nations and the UN Security Council actually announced that Saddam Hussein was the initiator of war, and all the countries that had helped Saddam Hussein later on somehow they said that they were sorry and they confessed to their crimes. The same story will happen to Trump. Whatever became of Saddam Hussein will happen to Saddam Hussein. We are not the initiator. The same way that in 1359 in the Iranian calendar, we were not the one that initiated the war, and we only defended ourselves and stood up to the aggressor and defeated the enemy. Today is the same. We are not the ones that initiated the breach of contract. Many plots were hatched against Iran in 1995 and 1996 because they wanted to provoke us, and so that they wanted to provoke us into leaving and withdrawing from the JCPOA, so that we would be responsible for all the legal consequences. But they failed to. Iran's patience, Iran's prudence, Iran's resistance, Iran's tranquility and composure thwarted that plot. In the second phase, Trump thought that the day when he withdrew from the JCPOA, we would immediately, 1 hour later, we would pull out of the JCPOA, and he thought that upon our pullout, he would refer the case to the UN Security Council. But he failed as well. In the third stage, Trump wanted to mobilize his allies behind himself, wanted to rally the support of his European allies, and wanted to make Europeans withdraw from the JCPOA as well, and he wanted to make his European allies to blame Iran. However, only two hated regimes in this region, except those two regimes, no nation and government supported Trump. Today, all across the world, political victory, legal victory, ethical victory is ours. We complained to the International Court of Justice in The Hague and to international institutions, and the Americans are very angry at this move by us because we complained to the ICC. Whatever verdict is issued by the International Court of Justice in The Hague, we will be victorious. We have lived up to our commitments. We have respected international laws and regulations. We have respected the United Nations Security Council. It was the U.S. that launched an economic war and psychological war on us. But the end of the war will be better than the end of the 8-year Iraqi war on us. And the time will be much shorter, and it is at the time when our experience is much more, and the enemy is weaker than any time before. During those years, all the East and West were supporting Saddam Hussein, supporting Saddam Hussein. But today, all the East and West are supporting us, and they are condemning what the United States did. With the same experience, we will emerge victorious in the face of Trump. During the Iraqi imposed war on Iran, Of course, they annoyed Iranian people. They created problems for the Iranian people. They killed and injured and some of our people and took some of them captive, but they failed to achieve their objectives, and our nation stood up to them and made the enemy rue the day. Today, the same event will happen. Similar event will happen. We will not allow the Americans to bring our great nation to its knees. Undoubtedly, they have created some problems for our people, and they will create problems for our people. However, we will weather this historical situation and these twists and turns. Undoubtedly, our people, they are able to be hopeful about their future, and they have trust in the prudence of the Islamic establishment, and they trust the guidelines of the leader, and they trust the efforts made by their government. If all of us are together and we join hands, and if we stand together more quickly at a very lower cost, we will be able to weather the current situation. The 8-year Iraqi-imposed war passed. Now it is up to the world to make judgment. Was the Iranian nation the victorious one or the aggressors? Now the whole world can make a judgment, and it is saying that it was the Iranian nation that emerged victorious, not Saddam Hussein. And the coming months will show that the one which will be defeated in this political and economic and psychological war will be the United States. The Iranian nation will emerge victorious the same way that Iranians have been victorious in other fields. They say they are asking us to give up our defensive weapons. They say if you want us to return to the JCPOA, you must give up your missiles. They are asking us. They say if you want us to return to the JCPOA, they in their own words, of course, they say Iran shouldn't interfere in the regional. In the regional affairs. Iran will not give up its defensive weapons. Iran will not reduce its defense capabilities. Rather, we will increase our defense capabilities day by day. You are angry at our missiles. It means that our most influential weapons are our missiles. So we appreciate the value of our missiles more than ever before. You're asking us not to be present in the region. You are thousands of kilometers away, and so what are you doing here in our region? We have always been protecting the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. We have always been protecting the Indian Ocean. We have always been protecting the Bab al-Mandab. Today, it is our vessels that are protecting and safeguarding the region. Statistics show that the trade vessels of different countries, they have confessed to that. Today, the great Iranian nation are very popular and respected by the people of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and they are in the hearts of the people of Yemen. Where are you? Where do you stand? You provide military weapons to two countries to bombard the innocent people of Yemen and bring famine upon millions of people. Of course, Iran is influential in the region. Iran is a great influential country in the Middle East region. Iran will uh, Iran will not remain silent in the face of aggression against innocent regional nations. We have learned this lesson from Imam Hussein. We love Karbala, Ashura, the culture of Ashura, the culture of Karbala. Our achievement from Karbala is our faith, power, motivation, standing up to the enemy, resistance, making sacrifices. And at the end of the day, it was we will see the humiliation of the enemies of righteousness. All the armed forces, Basij, police, army, and all Iranian nation, all the people of the Iran that defended their country during those years, I thank them all. May God bless the souls of all the martyrs. And also, we pray for all the disabled war veterans. We ask God Almighty to give them rapid recovery. May God bless you all.
Well, the speech that you just heard was Mr. Rouhani talking to the army personnel that are holding a military parade on the occasion of Iran's Sacred Defense Week, or the Holy Defense Week. As you know, this is the annual commemoration of the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq War. This is when the Iraqi army and Saddam Hussein launched an all-out war on Iran, which lasted for 8 years, basically with Iraq getting support from all the countries around the world, while Iran was left out trying to fight and defend its borders. Now, as you heard in the speech that was made by the Iranian president, he pointed out that Iran has never been an aggressor. Iran has never launched a war against any other country. It was other countries that have always launched a war against Iran, including Iraq in 1980. It also pointed out to the atrocities, the egregious atrocities of the Iraqi army and Saddam Hussein against Iranians. He pointed out to the chemical attacks that are completely against the Geneva Convention that were launched against the city of Sardasht and also the city of Halabja, which interestingly is an Iraqi country. There were gas attacks there for which Iran is still suffering the consequences. Now, quite interestingly, the Iranian president drew a comparison between Saddam Hussein and the U.S. President Donald Trump. He said that back in 1980, Saddam Hussein tore the 1975 treaty, an agreement on the borders between Iran and Iraq, and he claimed, of course, that this treaty does not serve the national interests of Iraq, and therefore he tore the treaty and launched an all-out offensive against Iran. Now, it is pretty much the same with U.S. President Donald Trump, who decided to unilaterally withdraw from the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, the result of more than 12 years of negotiations between Iran and the P5+1, an international agreement for which the United States decided to unilaterally leave. Now, Mr. Rouhani quite interestingly pointed out that the main objective of Saddam Hussein back then was to launch a war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and this is basically the main objective of Donald Trump right now as well. Now, as it has become a tradition over the past years, on this occasion, Iran holds military parades in all of its cities. In Tehran also, we're receiving live images from Tehran, as well as Bandar Abbas, which is an important place because we will be able to see Iran's Navy also taking part in the military parade in the Persian Gulf. Now, I've been told that our correspondent, Saman Kujuri, is on the ground in Tehran observing the military parade. He will be giving us some updates about the event today. Now, do we have someone on the line? Yes, there he is. Saman Kujuri, our correspondent. Can you tell us what's happening, Saman?
Well, Gussie, I'm talking from the venue where we had President Hassan Rouhani taking the floor, indeed making a speech. What we're expecting for today is different units and divisions of the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, the Basijor Volunteer Forces, the police forces, as well as the army are about to join hands in order to have a military parade to mark the 37th anniversary of the 8-year Iraqi post-war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The military parade is about to begin anytime soon, and the opening speech was made by Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, who, as you just mentioned, talked about the history of the Iraqi post-war against the Islamic Republic of Iran and all the reasons behind that. Talked about the tearing apart of the treaty between Iran and Iraq, and that initiated a war. The very important parts of President Hassan Rouhani's speech was that he said that Iran has never initiated any war against any country in the past. Over 200 years, and it said that one of the the beginning of the Iraqi post-war on Iran was that the former dictator Saddam Hussein was in that time acting on behalf of the U.S. administration, and he was launching a proxy war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Today, in today's international developments, as we see after the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA, we see that today the U.S. administration itself has entered a war, and that is has entered a political and economic war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, because he said actually in the past couple of years the Americans, the U.S. administration and their international allies have failed to achieve their goals against the Islamic Republic of Iran because of the resistance and the perseverance shown by Iranian nation in different spheres. And today, as President Hassan Rouhani said, that this time again in the political war waged by the U.S. administration, this time the Iranian nation will stand proudly once again, and they will never give up their military capabilities. The Iranian nation will never give up their missile capabilities. He said that one of the conditions put by the U.S. administration, Trump administration, is that Iran wants the American administration to come back to, indeed, to return back to the JCPOA. Iran needs to give up their missile capabilities, but President Hassan Rouhani emphatically said that Iran will never give up its military capability. Iran will never give up its military power, and definitely it will increase and boost its military defense and power on the basis, because this is what has worried the Americans, and because Iran wants to make any change in its defense capability for the worse. I mean, if they want to decrease the power in defense capabilities, definitely the pressure from the United States will increase. So the Iranian nation will stand proud this time, and they will never up to the bullies of the United States. And as we are expecting a military parade to take place anytime soon, and different divisions and units of the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran to pass by in the presence President Hassan Rouhani. Of course, we are waiting to see what types of military equipments and new capabilities will be put on display as different units and divisions will parade. So in due time, we'll come back to you, Gisu, for latest update as we continue the military parade on the 37th anniversary of the Iraqi post-war on the Islamic Republic of Iran, Gisu.
Well, Saman, yes, just as you mentioned, this is a show of Iran's might and the capability of its armed forces. So we're looking forward to you giving us an update on the new military hardware that will be unveiled today, and of course, tell us more about the events that will be forthcoming during the day. Thank you very much. Now, that was our correspondent, Saman Kujuri, on the grounds where the military parade is taking place on the occasion of Iran's Sacred Defense Week. As we've told you before, this is the anniversary of actually it's the annual commemoration of the 1980 to 1988 Iraqi imposed war on Iran. It is marked by parades being held in different cities, including Tehran, from which we're receiving some live images, as well as Bandar Abbas. We're also receiving some live images from Bandar Abbas at the moment, which you can see right there on the screen. This is actually quite important because we will be able to observe Iran's naval capabilities as well. Now, also, it might be interesting to point out that the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force, the IRIAF, and also the Islamic Revolution's Guards Corps, the IRGC, will be holding joint military drills as well. Now, as you know, this ceremony is actually sending a message of peace, not a message of aggression. This is Iran showing that it is capable of defending its own borders, and of course something that is quite important for Iran, including its missile capability, which is completely defensive and necessary for Iran in order to protect its borders based on the experience that it had from 1980 to 1988, fighting a proxy war with almost all the Western countries, backing Saddam Hussein against Iran, providing him with all kinds of military hardware, weapons, logistics, all kinds of help, including chemical weapons, which is completely against the Geneva Convention. Now we're receiving some live images from Bandar Abbas. As you can see, this is the Persian Gulf, and Iran's Navy is holding its military drill in the Persian Gulf, as you can see right there. This is the southern city of Bandar Abbas, near the southern coast of Iran in the Persian Gulf. As Mr. Rouhani mentioned in his speech, this is a show of might. It is to show to the countries all over the world, particularly the United States, that Iran will not bow to their demands. So Iran will be always protecting its borders and its national interests, and it will not be bullied into what the U.S. president has planned for it. Now, for that to be mentioned, the same way that for 8 years Iranians fought an unequal war, actually, it will be the same now that the United States president has launched an economic war on Iran by launching sanctions against the Iranian people. Another interesting point maybe to note right now would be the way that the Iranian president drew comparison between Donald Trump, the U.S. president, and Saddam Hussein, and he said the same things that happened to Saddam Hussein will be happening to Donald Trump. The images that you're watching, as we've told you before, is a countrywide military parade being held in Iran on the occasion of the Sacred Defense Week, or the Holy Defense Week, the annual commemoration of the 1980 to 1988 Iraqi imposed war on Iran, a war that was launched against Iran. As the president pointed out, Iran has never been an aggressive power. It has never launched a war against any other country, despite the fact that it has been attacked by other countries, including Iraq in 1980, when the Iraqi president Saddam Hussein at the time tore the 1975 treaty that defined the borders between Iran and Iraq. He said that that treaty was not in the best interest of his country and therefore used it as a pretext to launch a war against the Islamic Republic. Of course, the president also noted that this was a war against the Islamic Republic. It was intended to weaken the Islamic Republic. As we've told you before, these are live images that we're receiving from Tehran and the southern port city of Bandar Abbas, where an all-out military parade is being carried out. To discuss that further, we are joined by Professor Mohammad Marandi. Thank you very much, Professor, joining us on the phone.
Professor, thank you for having me.
Professor, thank you very much for joining us on this occasion. Can you tell us about the significance of this military parade, particularly at this point in time and considering the threats from the U.S. and the sanctions that are being imposed on Iran?
Well, it is an important parade because, as rightly pointed out, it is the anniversary of the U.S.-backed invasion of Iran by Saddam Hussein. And what I would add to what you said earlier was that during the 8-year-long war, the United States and the European countries helped Saddam Hussein, and near the end of the war, not only were they providing them with extensive capabilities to use chemical weapons, but also near the end of the war, they directly got involved. So the United States began striking Iranian oil installations. They downed an Iranian airliner. They destroyed Iranian naval ships and civilian ships in order to help Saddam Hussein in the war effort. So the United States was fighting the war alongside Saddam Hussein, both indirectly and directly. And the parade is there to remind people that Iran needs to have a strong defense capability in order to prevent history from repeating itself.
Mr. Marandi, we also had the Israeli Prime Minister last week threatening Iran of a nuclear annihilation. How does that play out regarding this military parade?
Yes, it was a subtle threat, and that it's ironic how the Western media says nothing when such threats are made, yet when an Iranian leader says something about apartheid and the Israeli regime being illegitimate because of its racist nature, Iran is utterly antagonized and despised throughout the Western media. I think it's important for people to begin to open their eyes to the reality of the so-called free world, which is, it's clear that there's no freedom in the Western media. But one question that I think your viewers should be asking themselves is, if the North Koreans were to threaten, let's say, Japan with nuclear annihilation, what response would the Japanese government have to the Japanese people who would be calling for a nuclear deterrent? So basically what the Israeli regime is doing is raising questions about the defense of people in this region against their nuclear threat.
Now, Professor, we also have the U.S. pointing to Iran's missile defense system and trying to get Iran to let go of that. How should that play out? I mean, does that make any sense?
No, that would be the most foolish thing that any Iranian leader could ever do. It is Iran's missile defense that prevents the United States from attacking Iran. It's Iran's missile defense that prevents U.S. supported regimes and terrorist organizations from being able to strike Iran with impunity. Iran's missile defense capability is quite effective, and it's quite inexpensive because of Iran's strong missile deterrence. Iran's military expenditure is much lower than any other country in this region. So the United States, it gives countries like Saudi Arabia hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons, and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Kuwait. But in reality, those weapons have little effect on the Iranian population because Iran has a strong and inexpensive deterrent.
Thank you very much. That was Professor Mohammad Marandi joining us on the phone from Tehran University. And the images that you're watching are live images that we are receiving from the two cities of Tehran and Bandar Abbas. As we've told you, this is an annual commemoration, a parade that is held as an annual commemoration of the 1980 to 1988 Iraqi-imposed war on Iran. Now we will be bringing you more of these images as the military parade continues throughout the day. Now, the images that you just saw were live images that we received from Tehran and Bandar Abbas, a military parade that's being held on the occasion of Iran's Sacred Defense Week. Of course, we will be covering more of the events that will be unfolding today as this military parade continues.